Welcome to the Enlightened Misfits podcast, the space for entrepreneurs on a quest for unwavering certainty and purpose. I'm your host, Lauren, and each episode is a compass guiding you through authentic conversations, unraveling the mysteries of your human design chart, and offering tools from the remarkable guest. Join me as we embark on a journey to manifest greatness and create a life aligned with our deepest purpose. This is the space where misfits find their enlightenment. Welcome to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. I am your host, Lauren. In today's episode, I have Elies. She is a STARSEED guide and light language activator. Welcome, Elies. So happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren.
Of course. I'm super excited for our conversation. Can you kind of tell the listeners kind of a little bit about your story? So like what got you into STARSEED work or light language work, kind of where you started and where you are today?
My light language work is somewhat, I chanced upon it by accident, if you may. Well, there is no accident, but it felt that way at the time. So in 2016, I just quit my full-time job, and I quit in 2015, and then a year later in 2016, when I was actually in a writing workshop with my mentor at the time, Regina Sayer, and we were supposed to be writing, right? This is a writing workshop. And then halfway through the workshop, she's like, oh, your light language is going to come out. I'm like, what? Like, I just came out of corporate, right? So light language is like totally out of the world. I barely meditate. I was like so new to the spiritual journey in a way. And then I was like, okay, whatever, since I pay you and I trust you, do what you need to do, right? And then she kind of like guided me through an activation process during then. And then true enough, the light language came out and I was like, ooh, what is this coming out of my throat? It's almost like it just came out. I don't even have to try or force it. And then like, it's even actually almost like I cannot stop it. Like it's like, I don't know, like probably 1,000 years of things that are being held here that are waiting to be released, like just came out at once. Even though I didn't understand what it meant at the time, but like it just felt so much pure love and almost like ecstasy or cosmic orgasm, if you may, but it just felt so true and so good and so pure that I was like, oh, I love this. That's kind of how I started light language for myself. And then of course, like I practiced it, I deepened it and honed it over the years, which led to where I am. And as to the starseed piece, is kind of also like I was surrounded by starseed my whole life without identifying as one, which is irony, right? Like, like oh, everyone around me is a starseed, but I'm not. And then like one fine day when I was in Bali, and then there was this one night where the whole town has to turn off their electricity as part of the silent day culture. And then there was the first time I saw the Milky Way, and the night was so bright with stars, and I was like, oh my God, I felt so home, and I felt like this calling. Like it's not just about like a pretty sky and pretty stars. I mean, yes, they are pretty, but like really feeling pulled towards like the stars. And then I heard a voice inside of me that kind of say, you are home and we are always with you. We have never left you. And that point, I knew like that was my star family talking to me. And that's when I'm like, oh, I'm a starseed. So it's like kind of that's the moment where everything clicked. Yeah, so they all kind of come in bits and pieces, but then when I weave it in together, that's kind of how it led me to where I am.
I love that. I love, especially when you said about corporate. My mentor, she does light language too, as well. And she came from corporate. There's actually a couple other people that I know that came from the corporate. And it's like one jump from it was for her to come out on the internet doing light language is very scary to her, as what she said. And lately, I've always been very drawn to the shamanic path, which I'm a shamanic practitioner. But same thing with light language too. And one day, my daughter was sitting in the yard. I was meditating. We were just playing. And then I started recording a video. And all of a sudden, my daughter sounded like she was talking light language. And I looked over at her and I was like, what are you saying? And she's just looking at me. She's like, what, mommy? And then my mentor had messaged me and she said it sounded like she was just, because she listened to the video. And I
Mm-hmm.
posted it, not even thinking anything, thinking, oh, I didn't record that. So I went back and listened to it and I was like, oh my goodness, she's channeling light language. And she doesn't know what she's saying. I don't know what she was saying because it's not something that we can interpret, like for like what she's saying. And then I go back later and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was a message I've been asking for. So I've kind of been tapping into my like language too. I don't do it, I can't, sometimes I can clear out stuff, but it's not, I have to practice, right? It's all about practice and stuff. I've actually been practicing more. But it's not something that I would offer like clients or anything, just because I feel like I need to clear out that channel a lot more. But I feel like it's came with my third chakra clearing too, and speaking and having my podcast and being a motivational speaker and doing events and all that stuff. I feel like that truly has opened up. I don't know if it's for you, because I know you also have a podcast, um, opened up my communication or just speaking what I want to say versus not. And it's just being held here, right? I feel like that's a huge thing for entrepreneurs. Of what I noticed is their message is not clear, or their marketing, their messaging is not clear because they have blockages or their trauma, or they don't want to be interpreted a certain way or judged or whatever. So yeah, that's I love that you had that experience, because I feel like a lot of people listening to this probably can relate to that. Or they could be channeling language and they just haven't spoke about it because they're scared.
Exactly. And I love how you bring out that point, which really sounded to me about, like that embodying the truth of who we are and that authenticity piece. Because one of my biggest lesson that I've learned from light language is surrender. Because like as we talked before, right? Especially as the one who channel it, is really, it's not even humanly possible to try to stay in the head and channel and try to understand and channel. So it's kind of like you just have to let it go and let it flow. So at the beginning, it was like super challenging because I'll be channeling like one sentence. I'm like, but that like doesn't make sense. And then like because like I was so new in the journey, right? But then that's like my biggest lesson to like just let it go. And then the more I do it, the more I can surrender and let it go and trust. And that eventually like reflect in all areas of my life, in the way I show up, whether it is for my podcast or my business or for my clients. That piece of surrendering and letting go is so big, because like if I'm channeling something that sounded like like it doesn't make sense to people, then surely everything else is more acceptable, if you know what I mean. Like it cannot get more weird than that, if you know what I mean. So it's like that really break out that coming out of the spiritual closet piece for me as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. When you say that in the beginning, I feel like that was me in the beginning, trying to understand what,
Mm-hmm.
like, even like when I would be putting things, like, even when I just channel normally, it's like I'll just hear random stuff, or I'll like stuff, like random stuff will just come through me. And the one thing I asked, it was probably like a couple months ago, was, it was like, you have to surrender, you have to do this, you need to surrender more. And I was like, fuck, how am I supposed to do that? Like, what do you mean? So then that's when I adopted the gift of channeling light language, and then I started to try to control it. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand it, so how am I supposed to channel and then help other people? So that I'm like, should I just not do it? And then it's like, just when I would do different stuff, I would say different things. Or just randomly, if I'm singing in the shower, it feels like it's more safer, I guess, to do that, like say that, kind of clear out stuff. But yeah, I mean, I feel like now with my social media presence and like my online presence, I wouldn't I don't necessarily feel like I would be scared to channel. It's just that I feel like I need to be more confident and practicing. So I just have to do my part and put the action into practicing it, right?
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, and
mm-hmm,
not have, but I feel like when I do channel, and it could be channeling light language, it could be just channeling whoever, the
mm-hmm,
divine, whatever comes through. I'm not controlling that. So I'm definitely surrendered then. So it's like I have to figure out why it's so different for light language. You know what I mean? So
mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Speaking about surrender and trauma and letting go, how, from your perspective, how does trauma healing play an important role in the journey for light workers, healers, star seeds, for stepping into their entrepreneurial path?
It is so fundamental. That's what I really believe. So part of the work that I do is also like supporting light workers and starseed and visionary on their starseed priestess path. And part of that priestess path literally begins with shadow work. And I just talked about this on another podcast another day where we talk about shadow work. And there are so many shadow work, of course, but one of the biggest shadow that we have as a light workers or priestess or whatever name you want to call it is the fear of our own power, right? And then the fear of being seen and being heard and being visible, because what if I'm seen and I found and then I got killed again, like that kind of like ancestral trauma. And even in this modern day, maybe a more modern version of it is like, oh my God, I'm gonna get criticized online and I'm gonna get trolled and like people are gonna like say nasty thing, whatever. They're gonna call me a witch, you're gonna call me a scam, whatever that is. And part of like that trauma really is, or like the shadow work that I was sharing is that it is actually one of the most empowering thing to do is to empower and allow ourselves to actually give ourselves full permission to not be seen, to not be okay, to not be perfect, to not be whatever that, is not good enough, instead of like trying to push away that feeling, right? And that shadow and jump straight into the light. It's like when you really allow yourself that space, you will finally feel like, oh my God, I can breathe now because you're no longer suffocating yourself. And from there, then, you will then suddenly realize that, oh my God, everything about this is not even true. It's not real. It's not true that I'm not good enough. It is not true that I'm a scam. It is not true that I am fake, whatever that is. And then from there, once you shine light on it, it transform and it reveal this entire thing. So definitely trauma really play a huge part. And that's it, right? It's also important to notice not to get caught in that trap, meaning to say like, to be forever doing the shadow work and never coming out of the shadow is like another trap. Like, you're not gonna use shadow work as an excuse. Like, yes, they are important, they are fundamental, and you want to go through it, feel it, heal it, but eventually you want to release it and move on. And it's a cycle, right? It kind of repeats. So a lot of us may feel like, oh, haven't I already done this and I'm gonna go through this again? Yep, you are. But on a more elevated and different experience. But then it's a cycle that we need to understand. It's not linear. It is cycle, it is seasonal, and things like that.
Yeah, I love that you said that it's seasonal too, because just like we have seasons, in the United States, I mean, we somewhat have seasons right now, right? But um, it's like it's the same thing with, it's like every 3 months. I feel like my cycles are usually every 3 months. It's like for 3 months, it's a little bit difficult for me, and then, or if it's challenging, I don't want to say the word struggle because I don't struggle anymore, but it's just challenging. There's challenges that come up, and then 3 months, it's just like, oh, I like this light. It's like, I'm not tired. I'm happy. It's like joyful. And then I'm just like, oh, it's coming. I just know it. But it's just, I feel like I personally love to do shadow work. I guess I could probably even call myself a shadow worker, because I feel like there's so much wisdom in people's shadows. And I feel
Mhm.
when I started when I personally started looking at that for myself, instead of being scared of like, oh, I have to heal this sexual trauma, or I have to heal this wound of abandonment, or I have to heal this not enoughness wound, or whatever. And a couple weeks ago, I was doing a podcast recording with another shaman healer, and he made a comment. He said, "You know what? I realized that the ultimate wound that all of us have is the not enoughness wound. Like it's always all these symptoms, it's all this stuff on top of it, but it comes down to like when you said about the star seed and not feeling enough. I feel like there's always something deeper, deeper, deeper. And it's always, I'm not going to say enough. I'm not going to do enough. I'm not going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's actually what I had, this aha moment the last couple months, that it kept coming up, kept coming up. And I'm like, why do I constantly feel like I'm not doing enough? I'm not making enough. Like it's only just very surface level. And then I realized, oh my goodness, it's because I finally got down to the seed and the root of, I have to heal this. What if in this moment, everything is okay and everything is enough, you know? And I feel like that has really empowered me personally, and teaching that to my clients, that it's quicker to get to abundance and it's quicker to get to my goals when I have that mindset. But when you feel like, oh God, I feel like in this dark hole, it's harder to get out of that, versus I have all the tools now to go do what I need to do and then not avoid it. Cause I can get very avoidant or reject parts of myself to feel like that's going to get me there quicker. And it's not. I mean, I still have to kind of remind myself, like, it's like my inner child walking down the hallway. I'm like, we're not dealing with you right now. Like trying to avoid what I know I need to maybe put a boundary around or help her with or whatever, So yeah, I feel like there's always people say, oh, like I'm healed or I'm healing. I'm like, well, you're still on earth. So obviously not. We're still
And
here.
also,
So obviously a lesson you need to learn. Right?
yeah, and the thing about like the avoidant piece, right? I often share with my clients that like, do you want to feel it for maybe say 30 minutes or even 3 minutes, whatever you're feeling. I'm not even asking 3 days. Maybe just feel it for 3 minutes if that is new for you. Or do you want to carry that emotional baggage for 30 years or for the rest of your life? It's not a bad deal, really. Like if you like logic, like that is some logic for you. Like feel it just for 3 minutes or 30 minutes or carry it for your lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, like, I know I will choose the first one. At least now I will, but yeah.
Yeah. That's actually a very good mindset to have. Like when you're feeling a feeling that you don't understand. And I guess I can go to, if you have kids, like letting them or helping them feel it because they don't really know what that is. My daughter, my boyfriend had said to me, you need to really watch your anger. It's like, I know, I feel very angry. But I realized through my own kind of like self-reflection that my anger is just very suppressed sadness from when I was a kid, from when I was an adult, maybe from my divorce, whatever it was, that I get so angry. And then I realized, I had my daughter watching me, and then she was mimicking what I was doing. So I could see it outside. Like, obviously, I know how she feels because I feel like that inside sometimes. And I talked to this about a client too. She said, I've had a lot of trauma when I was younger. And I feel like sometimes when my daughter acts out, I feel like I don't even want to comfort her. And I was like, that's very normal. That's actually very normal for someone that has gone through a tremendous amount of trauma. Because I feel the same way sometimes. It's just like my inner child is like, why does she get to be comforted and we didn't get to be comforted? And it's more of like, that's when I had to realize, well, we're an adult and we can place boundaries. And then I realized, just through my own personal experience that I have to place boundaries with my own inner child or inner teenager or whatever, because if not, I'll self-sabotage or I'll get into this loop of depression or anxiety or whatever, so I feel like with that mirroring, especially with my daughter, she helps me more understand myself, because sometimes I don't feel angry, or maybe I'm acting angry or I'm acting miserable. Maybe I just need to put myself in timeout. So like, she has timeout And she's like, Mommy, you need to go to timeout. I was like, well, I'll go stare at a wall. It's fine. Like I'm okay with timeout, right? I can go put myself in timeout. But it's actually very interesting when, I feel that way, especially now I'm going to use your technique. So thanks for sharing that. Cause I'm like, I just need to feel, I think I reject part of like, I just need to feel angry, or I'm just allowed to be angry. Like I'm not angry. I just have to feel the anger, and it will probably, I'm sure, it'll be released so much quicker than me being mad for 2 hours, from
Mm-hmm.
it will be definitely a huge difference, and just in my mood too. So yeah. So anybody listening, if you are trying to avoid stuff or you don't like to feel things, do it for 3 minutes and then progressively go up to 30 minutes or whatever you need to do, because that's very, very good advice. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
Okay, so getting back into light language, I feel like there's a couple other people I think that talked about light language here, but I am really intrigued with light language, and I know a couple of my clients are too. So, can you kind
Mm-hmm.
of explain to us how light language served as a tool, not only for a spiritual awakening, but for trauma healing? So, like maybe this could be like blocks for abundance in one spiritual journey or entrepreneurial journey.
It was interesting that you were sharing about anger, because that was exactly how I started using my light language. When I activated my light language, I was using it for my personal use first, right, before I share it with clients. And at the time, I was dealing with a lot of everything you were saying, healing through the not good enoughness, the separation from, which essentially you break it down even further, is just a separation of God and forgetting our divinity and that abandonment from God, right? Like that feeling. And I felt angry and irritated and frustrated easily. Like it doesn't even have to make sense. I just feel angry. And then I started like intuitively working with my dragon at the time. The dragon, which is an amazing ally to work through like purifying anger and transforming it. So I was consciously calling in my dragon, and every time I was channeling light language, I knew I was channeling my dragon to help me purify it. And I realized that every time I have that feeling of whatever, primarily anger at the time, I will then, feel it and recognize it and honor it. And then like, I will make a decision to transmute it. And then that's when I will use the light language. So that's why I break down the steps as that, because it's important not to try to bypass it. Otherwise, it's like, oh, I feel bad and I'll go yoga and I'll feel better, but then you're still not feeling it, right? So like honor it. It's not about feeling it for such a long time. The key really is honoring then rejecting. So yeah, once I honor and accept and allow, and then I'll be like, okay, I'm ready to release it. I'm ready to transmute it. Help me, dragon. And then I will channel the light language. And I realized like my mood shifted in like, I don't know, like less than 5 minutes, less than 1 minute, depending on the case, where I was like, wow, like, you mean I don't have to sit there and meditate for 1 hour, or like I don't have to do like whatever things that I need to do for a long time? I was like, this is so efficient, so to speak, from a human mind. And then I was like, oh my God, this works. So then, it kind of inspired me to keep doing and doing. So that's like one way you can use it to transform and purify like the lower frequency or emotions into like the higher frequency. And so that's kind of like tie into everything we were talking about, right? So we started with the shadow work. You purify and clarify all of that. And as you start to release more of that, then you will start to see more wisdom come through, more healing, more messages. And that's when you start to channel messages for yourself. And then you start to channel messages from others. And a lot of the time, it is just activation from my personal experience, meaning like you remember something that is deep within you, even if you can't pinpoint anything, but there is like this feeling of coming home, of knowingness, of like feeling one with the divine, of like feeling that pure love, pure, because what light language essentially is just a pure form of energy, one where we have not tried to label it with anything with the human mind, like it's just so pure that when you allow yourself to feel that frequency and tap into frequency, that's like the highest form of abundance, because that's like pure source and pure love energy. And from that point of view, like you can do anything, whether you want to do shadow work, you want to call in your next client, or like you want to get clear on your path, like everything just starts to unfold, like the synchronicity happen, right, with that surrendering process and the trusting the journey every step of the way, and then taking the inspired actions, and all of that just weave in together, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I love that you say that too, because I feel like I've had conversations with clients lately that they will say, well, people aren't buying my services, or, I have this group program and it's not selling. And my question is, have you done whatever? Usually it's some type of trauma healing that we're working on, or what, and they're like, well, I haven't got to that yet. I need to do this first. And I'm like, no, you don't get to decide what you get to do first. That's not how that's going to work. And so the reason why I asked you, because I wanted just different perspectives, because I feel like sometimes my clients think I could be biased to, like, I know what I did, but it's like, I'm telling you, if you don't heal that money trauma or that emotional block, you're not going to go anywhere in your business. I always say that entrepreneurship is just really expensive personal growth. Like,
100%. Yeah.
like, because it's always about you. So, I have, of course, like, offer different, like, shamanic practices. And I do love that you said the dragon, because I've always been very connected with the dragons and mermaids. And I feel like through my shamanic journey, it was very difficult. I wanted to quit a couple times. It was very hard, very deep shadow work, with just going deep into the shadows. And I always say that I like being in the shadows, but that's a little bit a different version of all of that. you know, it was stuff that I thought, I didn't remember that was brought to the surface, or I would, my trauma started when I was like 5. So a lot of that stuff I didn't remember. And I thought to myself, why don't I remember when I was 7 or 8 or 9? And then my mentor said, it's because what happens is your brain is trying to protect you, and it doesn't want you to remember that because of that difficult time. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's like I had to then I felt like I was reliving that, so that was a little bit difficult. Being like a adult reliving something when I was 5 and 6, I'm like, I feel weird. This doesn't feel like I should be. But I had to heal it. I had to feel it and to bring it. But I feel like the dragons, especially, it was like fire. It's like I can just burn it all up. Like I don't need. I learned the lesson from that experience, but I don't have to keep reliving it. I feel like that's really powerful. It was for me when I got the wisdom I needed from it, but I don't have to keep thinking about it. And I feel like a lot of trauma survivors or people that have trauma, especially what's going on in the world and all this TikTok stuff and all this stuff, it's just like I see so many people talking about sexual trauma or sexual abuse, and it's like these people are bashing these people of talking about their story. But I'm telling you, sometimes I feel like you can start to believe things that really didn't happen from, like you can start questioning your reality, because it's like, did that really happen, or did that not really happen? You know what I mean? Like, so you just don't really know. And I feel like you don't really, at that point, yes, you need to honor it, but you also have to move past it. Why are you still talking about something that like happened 5 years ago? Like it's like, that's what's keeping you stuck. And I feel like I just feel so bad for all these people. And the reason why I bring up TikTok is because like it's a huge, big thing on TikTok right now. And I'm like, God, I really feel bad for this woman. But it's just like, what are you talking about this things have happened, and you're still here 5 years later. Like, gosh, I can help you. That's what I feel like. Messaging her and be like, but I'm not going to do that. I will not do that. I just feel like, yeah, you should speak your story from your point of view, but that other person that was there that you're accusing and you're doing this and you're putting them out there also has a point of view. You know what I mean? So it's like you have to just honor your story and move forward. Of course, if it keeps happening, sure, speak about it. But I'm not really even sure why it even came up. I'm not really sure, but I just felt like I needed to say that because if you have a story and somebody's trying to silence you or whatever, speak it from your point of view, but don't do it as like revenge. Like if it's, I feel like it's more revenge.
Mm-hmm.
There's educational purposes and then there's revenge. And I feel like if you're doing it for revenge, you're going to get a lot of people to not like you, right? Yeah.
And it also comes back from intention.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, like, are you even doing it for the purpose of viral? Sorry to say, but
Right. Or
you
are you
know, like,
views or followers? Like you're just because people latch on to that stuff. And I hate that about like social media. It's like these stories, like one story, I don't know if you're on TikTok, but one story was about this girl got to 1 million views. And I hear me in my mind, I'm like, I talk about legit stuff that helps people. And then people get on TikTok and they're like dancing or they're, which is fine. I don't really care. That's whatever they need to do. But they talk about a rug buried in their backyard. Like, why is that interesting to people? But hear me, I'm going down the rabbit hole. I want to know if there's a body in there. So it's like, it's like that intriguing, what is it? Like I'm curiosity. So I get it. But
mm-hmm.
at the same time, it's just like, what's your intention? Is your intention to make money or is it to educate people? Like it's different. So if it was more of like educational purposes, sure, because I feel like, you know, sexual trauma and sexual abuse is not talked about or it's shamed. Like, don't talk about that. You can't speak about that. That is blah, 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 whatever. I know it was, for me when I started to talk about it, it was very shameful. Like I felt shameful that that even happened to me. Like, or why didn't I tell somebody? It's just like, how do you tell somebody that? You're not going to believe me. So it's like, it's that piece of that trust and feeling like safe, like that safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, speaking about the emotional or energetic blocks that you see with your clients, like how do you guide them to release them through their spiritual journey? Or, do you do this through light language or is there a different method that you do this?
It really depends on like what it is and like where the person is in the journey and what we are talking about, or kind of like very intuitive, honestly, like what it is at the moment. But like just kind of a combination of healing modalities from light language to EFT tapping is another one I do a lot because it's so important to regulate our nervous system and part of doing the somatic work and just like literally pretty much releasing the blocks from the body, right? Which is where a lot of the emotions are being trapped. So those two things are really big when it comes to clearing traumas from my work, like light language and EFT tapping. And I also do Akashic journey, but not so much for shadow work. I do it more like to help you bring out your gift and to help you see your highest vision. And kind of also part of the shadow work of that is look to, like cancel all vows, like, the vows that you may have taken about being a healer. Like you have to be poor if you're doing spiritual work, or you cannot make money being a light worker, things like that, clearing that poverty healer's vow, things like that. And also like a lot of energetic mindset, emotional, spiritual. It's very multidimensional. It really depends on where the person is, because if someone is very, very in the mind, it is to some degree important to satisfy their mind to some extent. Otherwise, it won't get quiet, if that makes sense. So that's
Yeah.
where like the mindset works needs to happen. However, when we work with people who are already doing the work, which you will be which you are familiar, you're not like people like us, we know that energetic is number one. Like energetic is like everything. And
Yeah.
once you shift the energy, everything else around it shift. So if those people are in that part of the journey and they understand that, like I understand energy work comes first, then, we will start with the energy work. So it's really pretty personalized and customized, especially when it's one-on-one. But of course, when it is a group setting or if it is a self-study, then yeah, light language, EFT tapping, Akashic journey, and just guided healing journey intuitively is like kind of like how I work through them.
Yeah. I was going to say, I got into EFT tapping when I was doing the shamanic journey. It was huge when I was trying to, especially for when like the parts of, well, when I was going through like the South, which is like the, underworld and like trauma, my mentor had said to me, have you tried the EFT tapping? Because I kept taking myself out of my body. Like I didn't want to feel it. And she's like, you're not
Mm,
have to feel it. So I'm very familiar with somatic. I do a lot of somatic like stuff with my clients and myself. So I was like, well, can I do it more somatically? And she's like, sure. So it was more of like, I had to do it, like I had to be in my body and feel it
mm,
instead of like, but I can still feel like even now, like there's sometimes that like I'll just daydream or like I don't want to do something and I'll just like stare out in space or whatever. And I'll try to like not feel it, but I'll have to bring my, like, okay, I'm like, come on, Lauren, let's get back in our body. We got to do this. And, it's so much quicker versus, it was months, probably years before, I obviously this happened when I was like 10, like every 3 years, something, it seemed like something would happen. So it's like going back to that first initial time was hard because it's just like, why do I didn't really understand, 5 years ago, why that mattered to be now up until this point. It's like, because you're 30, what am I, 35, 36 years old, and you're still dealing with stuff that happened when you're 5, so that is why. So it makes like sense when you said like full circle. So yeah, EFT tapping is huge because it forces you have to feel it. You are in your body, so it's like, oh, okay, I'm here, all right, I got it. I can't, you know go like daydream, because that's not going to happen when you're doing that stuff.
Mhm.
So is there, before we wrap up, is there any like last minute thoughts or any key takeaways that you wanted the listeners to know from our conversation?
I feel we have covered pretty good stuff today. It's pretty clear. So if I were to just kind of like maybe kind of reiterate whatever we are talking about, it probably just is, like to honor our feelings, to allow our shadow to be our greatest gift. That is part of like, like part of the priestess path is that you own your power, and that power includes shadow and light. And when you can honor that shadow, it comes with it great wisdom, great teaching, and great learning. And then how do we do that? Like we talk about being surrendering to what comes up, including how you feel, right? And trusting the process every step of the way, and taking inspired action as and when we feel called to. But it's really important to, if I really were to sum it up, which is something that is not a new concept, but then sometimes we just forget, is to just get out of our head. Just get out of our head and drop into our heart, like drop into the body. There is so much wisdom in our body as well, in our heart, in our yoni. That's like another topic, but like just really get out of the head. Like I often share, like if you feel that you're stuck, then most likely you are in your head. That's why you feel like you're going nowhere, because yep, you are going nowhere because the mind cannot logically try to understand what the divine is trying to do. It's too big for the human mind. So of course you will never get it. Of course you will feel stuck. But if you step out of that and just get out of the way and step into your divinity, in your humanity, and allow the divine to guide you and take over, you'll be like, oh, this is so much easier. Like, let's do it the easier way. And not only easier, I would say efficient too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I always hear and tell myself that my body knows, like my body keeps score, my body remembers. So it's like, even if I keep thinking I don't know how to do something, my body does. So it's like I just trust
Exactly.
myself now that my body will just do what it needs to do. Same thing, like if I get sick, it's just like, oh, I could feel myself getting sick. Or if I'm not listening, it's like the universe is like, sit down, like sit down. And then it's like I get really sick. So my body's like, well, we warned you and you didn't want to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode with Elies on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with somebody that you feel that will gain knowledge from listening. Stay tuned for more captivating conversations in the future. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Thank you for joining us on another enlightening episode on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you are a current or inspiring to be fempreneur, suffering from the fear of being seen and or feel very triggered when you're building your business, reach out to me at The Mermaid Light about my Rich and Resilient Biz Baddies. This is a collective text message Voxer support group designed to help you heal your triggers and turn imposter syndrome into bad bitch energy. If you resonate with our conversations and insight, don't forget to subscribe, rate the show, and leave a review. Your feedback fuels our mission. Remember, your journey to unwavering certainty and purpose is ongoing. So please make sure you stay connected with us on social media. Keep manifesting greatness in your life. Until next time, this is Lauren from the Enlightened Misfits podcast. Stay enlightened, stay inspired, and keep manifesting your extraordinary path.